How can one harmless night of playful flirting at my own house party end with an envelope on my doorstep and my neighbors whispering behind my back? Why did my husband leave without a word, only to return with proof, paperwork, and a look I'd never seen before? When the joke goes too far and the cameras never blink, is it still just a game? The wine was flowing, the music was perfect, and I was absolutely glowing. That's what I told myself as I caught my reflection in the kitchen window, adjusting my black dress and checking my lipstick one more time. Our house party was in full swing, and I felt like the star of my own show. "Ottilie, you look amazing tonight," Evan Laird said, appearing beside me with that charming smile that made my stomach flutter. Our neighbor from across the hall had been paying me compliments all evening, and I wasn't about to stop him now. "Why, thank you, Evan," I replied, letting my fingers brush his arm as I reached for my wineglass. "You're not looking too bad yourself." From across the room, I could see Malcolm loading the dishwasher with his usual methodical precision. My husband of 12 years, always the responsible one, always cleaning up after everyone else. He caught my eye for a moment, and I saw something flicker across his face. Disapproval, concern. I chose to ignore it. "So, tell me about this new consulting project," I said to Evan, leaning closer than necessary. "It sounds fascinating." Evan's wife Mina was sitting on our couch, nursing a glass of white wine and watching us with those cool grey eyes of hers. She'd been unusually quiet all evening, but I figured she was just being antisocial as usual. "Well, it's all about data management systems," Evan began, his hand finding its way to the small of my back as he spoke. "Very technical stuff, but the pay is incredible." I laughed a little too loudly. "I bet it is. You tech guys always make the big money." My friend Jessica appeared at my elbow, slightly tipsy and grinning. "Ottilie, you have to see the photos I just took. You and Evan look like you're having the time of your lives." She thrust her phone toward me, showing a series of pictures where Evan and I were standing very close together, my hand on his chest, both of us laughing. In the background of one shot, I could see Malcolm watching us, his expression unreadable. "Oh, those are great," I said, though something about Malcolm's face in that photo made me uncomfortable. "You should post them." "Already did," Jessica giggled. "Tagged you both. You guys are so cute together." I glanced over at Malcolm again. He was still loading dishes, but his movements had become more rigid, more controlled. When he straightened up, he looked directly at me, then at Evan's hand, which was still resting on my waist. "Malcolm," I called out, waving him over. "Come join the fun." But he just shook his head and turned back to the kitchen. Fine, I thought. If he wants to be antisocial, that's his choice. "Don't mind him," I told Evan, moving even closer. "He's always been the serious type, not like us fun people." Evan chuckled, his breath warm against my ear. "Well, I'm certainly having fun." The party continued around us. Our friends from work, neighbors from the building, even a few people I'd met through Eleanor's school. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves, and I was definitely the center of attention, exactly where I liked to be. My mother Ruth appeared beside me, her expression stern. "Ottilie, dear, perhaps you should check on Eleanor. It's well past her bedtime." I glanced at the clock. It was nearly 11, much later than our 10-year-old usually stayed up, but the party was just getting good. "She's fine, Mum. One late night won't hurt her." Ruth's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's not the point, and you know it." Before I could respond, she walked away, shaking her head. I rolled my eyes at Evan, who just shrugged. "Mothers, right?" he said. "Tell me about it." The evening wore on, and I found myself gravitating toward Evan more and more. We talked about everything: work, travel, books, movies. He was such an engaging conversationalist, so different from Malcolm, who preferred comfortable silences and practical discussions. "You know," Evan said, his voice low and intimate, "I've always thought you were the most interesting person in this building." My heart skipped a beat. Really, really, you're so vibrant, so alive. It's magnetic. I could feel myself blushing. When was the last time Malcolm had said something like that to me? I couldn't even remember. That's very sweet of you to say. I'm just being honest. Our faces were very close now, close enough that I could smell his cologne. His hand was on my waist again, and this time I didn't pull away. In fact, I leaned into it. Ottilie. Malcolm's voice cut through our conversation like a knife. I turned to see him standing a few feet away, his keys in his hand. Oh, hi, honey. Are you finally ready to join the party? I'm going out, he said simply. Going out, but the party's just getting started. I can see that. His eyes flicked to Evan's hand on my waist, then back to my face. I'll be back later. And with that, he was gone. The front door closed behind him with a quiet click, and I was left staring after him in confusion. Well, that was weird, I said to Evan, trying to laugh it off. Maybe he just needed some air, Evan suggested, though he looked uncomfortable now. Maybe. I shrugged and reached for my wine glass. More fun for us, right? But something about Malcolm's expression lingered in my mind. There had been something different about the way he looked at me, something I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something colder, more calculating. I pushed the thought away. This was my party, and I was going to enjoy it. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that our living room security camera had been recording everything. Every laugh, every touch, every lingering glance between Evan and me. The timestamp would later show that Malcolm left at 11:47 p.m., just 3 minutes after Evan's hand had settled on my waist and stayed there. The camera never blinked. It captured everything. I woke up the next morning with a splitting headache and the taste of regret in my mouth. The house was eerily quiet, too quiet. I stumbled to the kitchen, expecting to find Malcolm making his usual Saturday morning coffee, but the kitchen was empty. Malcolm, I called out, my voice hoarse from the night before. No response. I checked our bedroom, but his side of the bed was made with military precision. Had he even come home last night? I tried to remember when the party had ended, but everything after midnight was a blur of wine and laughter. Eleanor appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas and looking tired. Where's Daddy? She asked. I'm not sure, sweetheart. He must have left early for his morning run. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Malcolm's running shoes were still by the front door, and his gym bag was in the closet where it always was. I made Eleanor breakfast and tried to act normal, but my mind was racing. Why had Malcolm left the party so abruptly? And where was he now? My phone buzzed with notifications from last night's social media posts. Jessica had indeed uploaded those photos, and they were getting quite a bit of attention. I scrolled through the comments, most of them positive and fun, but one made me pause. My mother had commented, "Some behavior is better kept private, dear." I deleted the comment immediately and blocked her from seeing future posts. The last thing I needed was her judgment clouding what had been a perfectly innocent evening. Innocent. That was the word I kept coming back to. Nothing had happened between Evan and me. We'd just been talking, laughing, enjoying each other's company. If Malcolm had a problem with that, it said more about his insecurity than my behavior. Around noon, I heard Malcolm's key in the lock. He entered quietly, nodding at Eleanor, who was watching cartoons in the living room, but he didn't even look at me. "Where have you been?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Out," he replied, heading straight for his study, the spare room he'd converted into a home office for grading papers and lesson planning. "Malcolm, can we talk about last night?" He paused at the study door, his hand on the knob. "What about it?" "You left so suddenly. I was worried." He turned to look at me then, and I saw that same cold expression from the night before. "Were you?" I couldn't tell. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I think you know exactly what it means, Ottilie." He disappeared into his study and closed the door behind him. I heard the distinctive sound of the lock clicking into place. Malcolm had never locked his study before. Ever. I spent the rest of the day trying to act normal, but something felt off. Malcolm emerged only for meals, speaking to Eleanor in his usual warm, patient way, but treating me like I was invisible. When I tried to engage him in conversation, he gave me one-word answers or simply didn't respond at all. That evening, after Eleanor was in bed, I knocked on his study door. "Malcolm, can we please talk about this?" "I'm busy," came his muffled reply. "Busy with what? It's Sunday night." "Lesson plans." But I could hear typing, lots of typing, more than any lesson plan would require. I tried the door handle, but it was locked tight. Monday morning brought more strange behavior. Malcolm was up and gone before I woke up, leaving only a brief note saying he'd taken Eleanor to school early for a math club meeting I'd never heard of. At work, my colleagues were buzzing about the party photos on social media. "You and that neighbor looked pretty cozy," my assistant Lisa said with a knowing smile. "Is there something you want to tell us?" "Don't be ridiculous," I laughed. "We're just friends. Good friends." "If you say so, but your husband didn't look too happy in that background shot." I pulled up the photos on my work computer, studying them more carefully this time. There was Malcolm in the background of several shots, and Lisa was right. He didn't look happy. In fact, he looked like he was taking mental notes. That afternoon, I decided to stop by Evan's apartment. Maybe he could help me understand what had happened, what Malcolm might have seen or misinterpreted. Mina answered the door, her expression cool and unwelcoming. "Hi, Mina. Is Evan home?" "He's working," she said curtly. "Oh, well, could you tell him I stopped by? I wanted to thank him for coming to the party." "I'll tell him." She started to close the door, then paused. "Ottilie?" "Yes?" "Next time you have a party, maybe keep it down. Some of us have work in the morning." The door closed with a firm click, leaving me standing in the hallway feeling confused and slightly hurt. Had I been too loud? I didn't think so. When I got home, Malcolm was in the kitchen making dinner. Eleanor was at the table doing homework, chattering away about her day at school. "How was math club this morning?" I asked her. She looked confused. "Math club? We didn't have math club today." I looked at Malcolm, but he was focused intently on stirring something on the stove. "Daddy said we were going early to talk to Mrs. Peterson about my grades," Eleanor continued, "but then we just sat in the car for a while before school started." "Sat in the car," I repeated. "Yeah, Daddy was doing something on his phone. Lots of typing." Malcolm still didn't look at me, but I saw his jaw tighten slightly. That night, I tried once more to break through the wall of silence. "Malcolm, this is ridiculous. We need to talk." "About what?" he asked, not looking up from his laptop. "About whatever's bothering you. About the party. About why you've been acting so strange." "I haven't been acting strange." "You locked your study. You've barely spoken to me in 2 days. You lied about Eleanor's math club." He finally looked at me then, and what I saw in his eyes made me take a step back. It wasn't anger. It was something much more unsettling. It was the look of someone who had made a decision and was completely at peace with it. "I didn't lie," he said calmly. "I said I was taking Eleanor to school early for a meeting. I never specified what kind of meeting or with whom." "That's semantics, Malcolm." "Is it? I've been thinking a lot about semantics lately. About the difference between what people say and what they mean. About the difference between innocent friendship and something else entirely." My heart started beating faster. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything, Ottilie. I'm observing. I'm documenting. I'm being very, very careful about facts." "Documenting? What are you talking about?" But he had already turned back to his laptop, his fingers flying across the keys. On the screen, I could see what looked like a spreadsheet with timestamps and detailed notes. I tried to get closer to see what he was typing, but he closed the laptop with a sharp snap. "I think you should get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be a busy day." As I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in my marriage. Malcolm wasn't acting like the quiet, predictable man I'd married. This version of him was calculating, methodical, and completely foreign to me. What I didn't know was that he'd spent the morning at his attorney's office, and that evening he'd been carefully cataloguing every piece of digital evidence from the party. The doorbell camera footage, the living room security recordings, the Wi-Fi logs showing Evan's phone connecting to our network, not just during the party, but on 3 previous occasions, when I'd claimed to be home alone. The spreadsheet he'd been working on had timestamps down to the minute, cross-referenced with social media posts, text messages, and photographic evidence. Malcolm had always been good with data. It was what made him an excellent math teacher. Now he was putting those skills to a very different use. Tuesday brought an unexpected visitor to my office. I was reviewing quarterly reports when Lisa buzzed me on the intercom. "Ottilie, there's someone here to see you. Says it's personal." I looked up to see a woman in a crisp business suit standing in my doorway, holding a manila envelope. "Ms. Ottilie Vane?" "Yes?" "I'm Jennifer Walsh from Hartley & Associates. I have a letter for you." She handed me the envelope and waited while I opened it. The letterhead was intimidating, clearly a law firm. As I read the contents, my blood ran cold. "Notice of preservation of evidence," the header read. The letter went on to demand that I preserve all digital communications, social media posts, photographs, and electronic records related to my interactions with third parties during the period of the past 6 months. What is this about?" I asked, looking up at the woman. "The letter is self-explanatory, ma'am. You're legally obligated to preserve all the materials listed. Any attempt to delete, modify, or destroy evidence could result in serious legal consequences." After she left, I sat staring at the letter in disbelief. Malcolm had hired a lawyer. Over what? A little harmless flirting at a party. I immediately tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried texting, but got no response. My hands were shaking as I pulled up social media on my computer. I'd planned to delete some of the more compromising photos from Saturday night, but now I was afraid to touch anything. The rest of the workday passed in a blur. I kept reading and rereading the legal notice, trying to understand what Malcolm thought he was doing. When I finally got home, I found him in the kitchen helping Eleanor with her homework. "We need to talk," I said firmly. "Now." He looked up calmly. "Eleanor, why don't you finish your math problems in your room? I'll check them in a few minutes." Once Eleanor was gone, I slammed the legal notice down on the kitchen table. "What the hell is this, Malcolm?" "It's a preservation notice," he said matter-of-factly. "I would have thought that was obvious." "Don't get smart with me. Why did you send lawyers after me?" "I didn't send lawyers after you, Ottilie. I sent lawyers to you. There's a difference." "This is insane. Over what? Talking to Evan at a party?" Malcolm stood up and walked to the kitchen counter, where his laptop was sitting open. He turned it around so I could see the screen. It was a detailed timeline, starting 6 months ago. Dates, times, and brief descriptions of events I'd completely forgotten about. March 15th, O mentions E stopped by to borrow sugar while M at work. April 2nd, O and E seen talking in hallway for 45 minutes by Mrs. Chen. April 20th, E's phone connects to home Wi-Fi network, 2:34:15 p.m., M at school. "You've been spying on me." "I've been observing patterns," Malcolm corrected. "Did you know our Wi-Fi router keeps logs of every device that connects, including timestamps and duration of connection?" I felt sick. "Malcolm, this is paranoid behavior. Evan is our neighbor. Of course his phone connects to our Wi-Fi sometimes." "Sometimes. According to the logs, his phone has connected to our network 17 times in the past 6 months. Always during school hours. Always when you told me you were home alone. That doesn't mean anything." "Doesn't it?" He clicked to another screen. Here's the interesting part. The doorbell camera shows him entering our building on 12 of those 17 occasions. But according to you, he only stopped by 3 times to borrow things. I stared at the data on the screen, my mind racing. How could I explain this? How could I make him understand that it wasn't what it looked like? Malcolm, you're connecting dots that aren't there. Yes, Evan and I are friends. Yes, sometimes he stops by, but nothing inappropriate has ever happened. Define inappropriate. You know what I mean. Actually, I don't. That's why I need you to be very specific about what you consider appropriate behavior with married neighbors. I could hear the trap in his words, but I couldn't figure out how to avoid it. We talk. We're friends. That's all. Friends. Malcolm nodded thoughtfully. Is that what you call it when someone's hand is on your waist for 12 consecutive minutes while your husband loads the dishwasher? How do you know it was 12 minutes? Because I timed it, and because the living room camera has timestamps. The room was spinning. This couldn't be happening. My quiet, predictable husband had somehow transformed into a forensic investigator, and I was his primary suspect. Malcolm, this is our marriage, not a court case. Isn't it? He closed the laptop and looked at me with those cold, calculating eyes. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like someone has been lying under oath. Under oath? We're not in court. Marriage vows, Ottilie. Forsaking all others. Ring a bell. I felt tears starting to form, but I pushed them back. I wouldn't let him make me the villain here. I have been faithful to you. I have never cheated. Again, define cheating. You know what cheating is. I know what I would consider cheating. But clearly we have different definitions, so I'm asking you to be specific. The conversation was going in circles, and I was getting more frustrated by the minute. This wasn't the Malcolm I knew. This version was cold, precise, and completely unforgiving. I'm not going to stand here and be interrogated in my own home, I said finally. Our home, Malcolm corrected. And you're absolutely right. You don't have to stand here and be interrogated. Something about the way he said it made my stomach drop. What do you mean? I mean you have choices, Ottilie. We all have choices. I've made mine. That night, I tried to call Evan. I needed to warn him about Malcolm's investigation, needed to make sure our stories matched up, but the call went straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later. Same result. Finally, I walked across the hall and knocked on his door. Mina answered, looking even less friendly than before. Is Evan available? He's not interested in talking to you. What? Why not? I think you know why. She started to close the door. Mina, wait. There's been a misunderstanding. My husband is... Your husband came to see us yesterday, she interrupted. He showed us some very interesting photographs and data logs. Evan and I have decided it would be best if we kept our distance from now on. The door closed with a definitive click. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. Malcolm had been to see the Lairds. What had he told them? What had he shown them? When I got back to our apartment, Malcolm was coming out of his study with a thick folder in his hands. Going somewhere? I asked. Just organizing some paperwork. What kind of paperwork? He paused at the front door and turned to look at me one more time. The kind that requires very careful documentation, Ottilie. The kind that leaves no room for misinterpretation or creative storytelling. After he left, I went to his study door and tried the handle. Still locked. But this time, I could hear something inside. A printer running, churning out page after page of whatever evidence Malcolm had compiled. I pressed my ear to the door and listened. The printing went on for nearly 20 minutes. Whatever Malcolm was planning, it was big. And I was starting to realize that I was completely unprepared for it. The HOA meeting notice appeared under everyone's door on Thursday morning. Emergency session, noise complaints and community standards was the subject line. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday at 2 p.m. in the building's community room. I knew it was about me before I even finished reading it. Did you see this? I asked Malcolm at breakfast, waving the notice. I did. Do you know what it's about? I have some idea. Eleanor looked up from her cereal. Are we in trouble? No, sweetheart, I said quickly. It's just boring grown-up building stuff. But Malcolm's expression suggested otherwise. Friday afternoon, I ran into Mrs. Chen in the elevator. She'd always been friendly before, but now she barely made eye contact. How are you, Mrs. Chen? Fine, she replied curtly. Looking forward to the weekend? She didn't respond, just stared at the elevator buttons until we reached her floor. As she got off, she turned back to me. Some people need to remember that families live in this building. Children who need their sleep. The elevator doors closed before I could respond. Saturday morning, I tried one more time to reach out to Evan. I caught him in the parking garage as he was loading groceries into his car. Evan, wait up. He looked around nervously, then quickly closed his trunk. Hi, Ottilie. I've been trying to call you. Yeah, I know. Listen, I can't really talk right now. This will just take a minute. It's about Malcolm and this whole misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, he interrupted. Look, you're a nice person, but I think we got our wires crossed somewhere. I was just being friendly at your party. Neighborly. Nothing more. I stared at him in disbelief. That's not... Evan, we've been friends for months. You said I was the most interesting person in the building. You said I was magnetic. I think you might have misinterpreted some things. He was backing toward the elevator now. I should get these groceries upstairs before the ice cream melts. Evan, please, don't let Malcolm's paranoia ruin our friendship. There is no friendship, Ottilie. There never was. I was just being polite. The elevator doors closed between us, leaving me standing alone in the parking garage, feeling like I'd been slapped. At 2:00 sharp, I walked into the community room. About 20 residents were there, including Malcolm, who was sitting in the front row with a leather portfolio on his lap. Mrs. Briggs, the HOA president, called the meeting to order. We're here to discuss some concerns that have been raised about noise levels and appropriate community behavior, she began. Mr. Vane has requested time to present some information to the group. Malcolm stood up calmly and walked to the front of the room. He looked completely composed, like he was about to teach a math lesson instead of publicly humiliating his wife. Thank you, Mrs. Briggs. I'll try to be brief. He opened his portfolio and pulled out a thick binder. Last Saturday evening, my wife and I hosted a party in our apartment. The gathering ran later than usual, with noise levels continuing past 11 p.m. However, noise is not my primary concern today. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. My concern is about behavior that affects our community's family-friendly atmosphere. He opened the binder and pulled out a large photograph. Even from where I was sitting, I could see it was from the party. A still frame from the security camera showing Evan's hand on my waist, both of us laughing, standing very close together. This image was captured at 11:44 p.m. last Saturday evening. The timestamp is clearly visible in the corner. He placed the photo on an easel he'd apparently set up earlier. What you're seeing is my wife, Ottilie Vane, and our neighbour, Evan Laird, who is married and lives in Unit 4B with his wife. I wanted to sink through the floor. Every person in that room was staring at the photograph, then looking at me. Now, I want to be very clear, Malcolm continued. I'm not here to discuss my marriage or to air personal grievances. I'm here because this behavior occurred in a common area of our building, in full view of other residents and their children. Mrs. Briggs leaned forward. Mr. Vane, what exactly are you asking us to do? I'm asking that we establish clear community standards about appropriate behavior in common areas and during building social events. Standards that protect the family atmosphere we all value. He pulled out another document. I've prepared a proposed amendment to our community guidelines. It addresses noise levels, appropriate conduct during social gatherings, and the importance of respecting all residents' comfort levels. I finally found my voice. This is ridiculous. Malcolm, You're embarrassing yourself and everyone else here. Malcolm turned to look at me with that same calm expression. Am I? Mrs. Patterson, you were at the party. Did anything you witnessed make you uncomfortable? Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman from the third floor, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Well, I did notice. It seemed like... It's okay, Malcolm said gently. You can speak freely. It did seem inappropriate, she said quietly. The way they were carrying on, with you right there and children in the apartment, it was uncomfortable to watch. Thank you for your honesty. He turned to address the room again. I have additional documentation if anyone would like to review it. Wi-Fi access logs, security footage, time-stamped photographs. Everything is available for inspection. The room was dead silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, judging me, condemning me. This is a witch hunt, I said, standing up. You're all acting like I committed some terrible crime. I was talking to a neighbor at my own party. Were you just talking? Mrs. Briggs asked quietly. Yes, nothing happened. Malcolm opened his binder again and pulled out another photograph. This one showed Evan and me even closer together, his face near my ear, my hand on his chest. This was taken at 11:52 p.m., he said, 8 minutes later. I looked around the room desperately, searching for a friendly face, someone who would defend me. But everyone was staring at the photographs, whispering to each other, shaking their heads. The proposed Community Standards Amendment is available for everyone to review, Malcolm continued. We can vote on it at next month's regular meeting. In the meantime, I hope we can all agree that our building should be a place where families feel comfortable and respected. The meeting ended with polite applause for Malcolm's presentation. As people filed out, they avoided making eye contact with me. A few stopped to shake Malcolm's hand and tell him how sorry they were that he'd had to go through this. I sat in my chair, long after everyone else had left, staring at the photographs still displayed on the easel. Malcolm began packing up his materials with the same methodical precision he brought to everything else. How could you do this to me? I whispered. Do what, Ottilie? Humiliate me in front of our neighbors. Make me look like some kind of what? I couldn't say the word, couldn't acknowledge what those photographs actually showed. You made me look bad. I didn't make you look like anything, Malcolm replied, closing his binder. I simply presented facts, documented evidence. If you don't like how you look in those pictures, perhaps you should consider why that is. He finished packing and headed for the door. By the way, he said, pausing at the threshold, I've scheduled Eleanor for some after-school activities next week. She'll be staying late most days. Why? Because children shouldn't have to witness their parents' poor choices, and because I suspect next week is going to be very difficult for our family. As he walked away, I realized that this was just the beginning. Malcolm wasn't just documenting my behavior anymore. He was building a case. Monday morning brought a new humiliation. When I arrived at work, I found my assistant Lisa huddled with 2 other colleagues, whispering and looking at someone's phone. They scattered when they saw me coming. Morning, everyone, I said, trying to sound normal. Morning, Lisa replied, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. I made it to my office and closed the door, then immediately pulled up social media on my computer. What I found made my stomach drop. Someone had recorded Malcolm's presentation at the HOA meeting. The video was grainy and the audio was poor, but you could clearly see him displaying those photographs and hear him talking about inappropriate behavior and community standards. The video had been posted to our neighborhood Facebook group and had already gotten dozens of comments. Most of them were supportive of Malcolm, praising him for standing up for family values and handling a difficult situation with dignity. The comments about me were less kind. I always thought there was something off about her. Poor man, he deserves so much better. This is what happens when people don't respect their marriages. I scrolled through comment after comment, each one like a knife to the chest. These were my neighbors, people I'd lived near for years, people whose children played with Eleanor. My phone rang, interrupting my social media spiral. Ottilie, it's Jessica. Oh, thank God, I was hoping you'd call. I saw the video. Jessica, I can explain. Can you? Because it looks pretty bad, Ottilie. I felt tears starting to form. It wasn't what it looked like. Malcolm is blowing everything out of proportion. Is he? Because I was there, remember? I took those photos, and looking back at them now, you're supposed to be my friend. I am your friend. That's why I'm telling you the truth. What you did at that party was wrong, and everyone could see it. I didn't do anything. You were all over that man while your husband was 10 feet away. How did you think that was going to end? After Jessica hung up, I sat in my office feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. My friends were turning against me, my neighbors were gossiping about me, and my husband was systematically destroying my reputation with his evidence and his calm, reasonable presentations. I tried to focus on work, but it was impossible. Every time someone walked past my office, I wondered if they'd seen the video. Every whispered conversation felt like it was about me. At lunch, I decided to go home and try to salvage what was left of my marriage. I found Malcolm in the kitchen, making a sandwich with his usual methodical precision. "We need to stop this," I said without preamble. "Stop what?" "This whole revenge campaign. The lawyers, the meetings, the public humiliation, it needs to stop." Malcolm took a bite of his sandwich and chewed thoughtfully. "I'm not running a revenge campaign, Ottilie. I'm documenting facts and taking appropriate legal steps to protect my interests." "Your interests? What about our marriage? What about Eleanor?" "What about Eleanor? Do you think she's better off watching her mother flirt with the neighbor while her father pretends not to notice?" "I wasn't." "You were." He pulled out his phone and showed me another photo I hadn't seen before. This one showed me and Evan standing very close together, while Eleanor sat on the couch in the background, watching us with a confused expression on her young face. "She asked me why you and Mr. Laird were acting like people do in movies," Malcolm said quietly. "She asked me if you liked him better than me." The photo hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't realized Eleanor was watching. I hadn't thought about how my behavior might look to her innocent eyes. "Malcolm, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Didn't you?" "No, it was just harmless flirting. It didn't mean anything." "To you, maybe. But it meant something to me. It meant something to Eleanor. It meant something to our neighbors who had to watch it happen." He finished his sandwich and rinsed his plate in the sink. "I've made an appointment with a family counselor," I said desperately. "We can work through this. We can fix our marriage." Malcolm dried his hands on the kitchen towel and turned to face me. "I've made some appointments too." "With who?" "My attorney, the bank, Eleanor's school counselor." My blood went cold. Why Eleanor's school counselor? "Because major life changes can be difficult for children. I want to make sure she has all the support she needs during the transition." "What transition?" But Malcolm was already heading for the door. "I'll pick Eleanor up from school today. She'll be staying with my mother for a few days while some things get sorted out." "Sorted out? Malcolm, what are you talking about?" "Check your email, Ottilie. Everything will be clear soon enough." After he left, I ran to my computer and pulled up my email. There, sent just minutes earlier, was a message from an attorney I'd never heard of. The subject line read, "Dissolution of marriage, Vane v. Vane." Inside was a formal petition for divorce, along with temporary orders for custody, support, and exclusive use of the marital residence. I read through the documents in growing horror. Malcolm wasn't just leaving me. He was taking Eleanor. He was taking everything. The petition cited irreconcilable differences and included a detailed timeline of my inappropriate relationship with Evan Laird. Every Wi-Fi log, every photograph, every timestamp was meticulously documented and presented as evidence of my pattern of deceptive behavior. But the worst part was the custody arrangement. Malcolm was asking for primary custody of Eleanor. with me getting supervised visitation every other weekend. Supervised visitation, like I was some kind of danger to my own daughter. I called the attorney's office immediately. I need to speak to someone about these divorce papers. This is insane. Ma'am, you'll need to retain your own counsel. We can't discuss the case with you directly. But this is my life, my daughter. I understand this is difficult, but you need to have your own attorney contact us. That's how these things work. I spent the rest of the afternoon calling divorce attorneys, but the ones I could afford were booked solid, and the good ones wanted retainers I couldn't pay. When Malcolm came home that evening, he was alone. "Where's Eleanor?" "I told you. She's staying with my mother for a few days. You can't just take my daughter away from me." "I'm not taking her away. I'm providing her with a stable environment while we sort through this legal process." "Legal process? Malcolm, we can work this out. We don't need lawyers and courts and all this formal nonsense." He looked at me with something that might have been pity. "Ottilie, you still don't understand, do you? This isn't a negotiation. This isn't a discussion. This is the natural consequence of choices you made." "What choices? Talking to a neighbor? Lying to your husband, repeatedly, for months?" He pulled out his phone and showed me a text message thread I'd forgotten about. Messages between me and Evan, talking about meeting up for coffee, complaining about Malcolm being boring and predictable. "Where did you get those?" "Your phone backs up to our shared cloud account. Did you forget?" I had forgotten. I'd completely forgotten that our phones were linked. "How many other messages are there?" "Enough," Malcolm said simply. "More than enough." That night, I lay in bed alone, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out how my life had fallen apart so quickly. A week ago, I was a happily married mother, hosting a fun party. Now I was facing divorce, custody battles, and social exile. And the worst part was that I was starting to realize Malcolm was right about one thing. This really was the natural consequence of choices I'd made. I just hadn't thought anyone was keeping track. The process server found me at my office on Wednesday morning. I was in the middle of a budget meeting when Lisa knocked on the conference room door. "Ottilie, there's someone here who needs to see you, says it's urgent." I excused myself and walked to the lobby, where a woman in a professional blazer was waiting with a clipboard and manila envelope. "Ottilie Vane?" "Yes?" "You've been served." She handed me the envelope and had me sign the clipboard, then walked away without another word. My hands were shaking as I opened the envelope. Inside were official court documents, a formal petition for dissolution of marriage, temporary custody orders, and a notice of hearing scheduled for the following Monday. But there was something else in the envelope that made my knees weak. A thick stack of photographs, printouts, and what looked like a comprehensive timeline of my interactions with Evan Laird going back 6 months. Every coffee meeting, every text message, every time his phone had connected to our Wi-Fi network, every social media post where we'd interacted. It was all there, organized chronologically and cross-referenced with timestamps from our building's security cameras. The level of detail was staggering. Malcolm had documented everything with the precision of a forensic accountant. I stumbled back to the conference room where my colleagues were waiting to continue the budget meeting. "Everything okay?" my boss asked. I need to go home, family emergency." But when I got home, I found another surprise waiting for me. The locks had been changed. I stood in the hallway, fumbling with my key, trying to understand why it wouldn't work. Finally, Mrs. Chen emerged from her apartment. "The locksmith was here this morning," she said, not unkindly. "Your husband left this for you." She handed me another envelope, this one containing a single key and a brief note. "Ottilie, per the temporary court order, you have exclusive use of the residence while the divorce is pending. I've moved out to ensure there are no conflicts or misunderstandings. Eleanor will remain with my mother until the custody hearing. Malcolm." I let myself into what had been our home and was struck by how empty it felt. Malcolm had taken his clothes, his books, his computer, and most of his personal belongings. The walls looked bare where his diplomas and awards had hung, but he'd left something behind on the kitchen counter, a final folder marked "For your attorney." Inside was a complete copy of everything he'd compiled, every piece of evidence, every timestamp, every documented lie I'd told over the past 6 months. There was also a USB drive labeled "Security Footage, Complete Archive." At the bottom of the folder was a handwritten note. 3 years after signing the papers, I waited outside Eleanor's middle school on a crisp Saturday afternoon. Supervised visits had ended 18 months ago. Now I had every other weekend, holidays split evenly, and a co-parenting rhythm that felt almost normal. Eleanor bounded out, backpack swinging, 13 and all legs and opinions. "Mom, can we get Thai food? Dad says it's too spicy, but I've been practicing my heat tolerance." I laughed, real easy laughter. "Deal. Pad Thai, extra chili flakes." We drove to the little place near my condo, the one with the sticky tables and perfect mango sticky rice. She talked non-stop, debate club drama, a crush on a boy in band, how she'd aced her algebra test. "Dad helped me study," she said, dipping a spring roll. "He's still super methodical, made me a whole spreadsheet for equations." I smiled. "That sounds like him." She looked at me across the table, suddenly serious. "You know, I get why it happened. The divorce, I mean. I was little, but I remember the tension. The way you two stopped laughing together." My throat tightened. "I'm sorry you had to live through that." "I'm not mad anymore," she said quietly. "Dad explained it wasn't about punishing you. It was about making sure I felt safe. And you've shown up. Every weekend, every call, every school play. You kept showing up." Tears pricked my eyes. "I'll always show up, Elle." She reached across and squeezed my hand. "I know." Later, when I dropped her at Malcolm's, he met us at the door. No tension, no coldness, just the quiet respect of two people who'd learned to navigate wreckage. "She had a good time?" he asked. "The best," I said. "She's brilliant, Malcolm. You've done an amazing job." "We both have," he replied simply. As I drove home, the weight I'd carried for years felt lighter, not gone but manageable. The affair that never quite became physical, the flirtations I'd called harmless, the lies I'd told myself, they'd cost me dearly. But the consequences had forced change I hadn't known I needed. I wasn't the same woman who'd let Evan's hand linger. I was someone who understood trust isn't rebuilt with words, but with consistent, unglamorous effort. And in the end, that was the only math that mattered.